Now I have the full transcript. Let me write a completely new story applying the formula. I want to be upfront. This story is around 5,000 words and will be very long in chat. I'll write it cleanly and continuously, no headers, no labels, pure story. My name is Megan Caldwell. I'm 31 years old, and I have been married to my husband Daniel for 6 years. 4 months ago, we hosted a housewarming party at our new home, the house we had saved for together for years, the one we finally bought after what felt like a lifetime of waiting. Family, friends, neighbors, everyone was there. It was supposed to be one of the happiest nights of our lives, and it almost was. Until my mother-in-law stood up in my own living room and told every single person in that room that I had been lying to Daniel for years. That I had married him for his money. That I wasn't who he thought I was. Within seconds, the room changed. I could see it happen in real time, the looks on people's faces shifting from celebration to confusion, then from confusion to something colder. Daniel stood next to me, and I could feel his grip on my hand loosen. But I didn't panic. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just stood there quietly, because I already knew something she didn't. And I knew that by the end of the night, the truth was going to come out, just not in the way she had planned. Let me start from the beginning, because none of this makes sense without it. Daniel and I met when we were both 23. He was working as a junior project manager at a construction firm, and I was finishing up my last year of a business accounting degree. We met through a mutual friend at a small get-together, and within 10 minutes, we were talking in the corner of the room like everyone else had disappeared. He was funny in that quiet, dry way that sneaks up on you. He listened when I talked, really listened, not just waiting for his turn to speak. We dated for 2 years, and then got married in a small ceremony with close family and a few friends. From the very beginning, Daniel's mother, Patricia, made it clear that she had reservations about me. She never said anything outright, at least not at first. It started the way these things always do, small comments, little observations slipped into conversations like seeds. "You have such simple taste, don't you, Megan?" She would say this while looking around whatever space we were in, as if she were cataloging everything that was missing. Or, "It must be nice to have Daniel handling the finances." I worried he'd end up with someone too independent to let him take care of things. At the time, I told myself she was just protective of her son. I made excuses for her the way you do when you're new to a family and you don't yet know which hills are worth dying on. I smiled. I brought desserts to family dinners. I asked about her garden and genuinely listened to the answer. And slowly, very slowly, I convinced myself that she and I had found a kind of peace. But I was wrong. I just couldn't see it yet. When Daniel and I started seriously saving for a house, I was the one who managed our finances. Not because Daniel didn't understand money, but because it was my field and we both agreed it made sense. I tracked our accounts, managed our budget spreadsheet, moved money between savings every month like clockwork. For 3 years, I watched that number grow, and every time it ticked upward, it felt like proof that we were building something real together. When we finally made an offer on the house and it was accepted, I cried in the car on the way home. Not pretty crying, the ugly kind, with shaking shoulders and completely ruined mascara. Daniel cried a little too, though he will deny that if you ask him. The housewarming party was my idea. I wanted to fill the house with people the first time, to let the walls hear laughter before we even finished unpacking. We ordered food, bought extra chairs, strung small lights across the back patio. Daniel's parents came, along with his older brother James and his wife, several of our closest friends, 2 neighbors we had already met, and a handful of people from Daniel's office. From the moment Patricia walked through the front door, something felt off. She moved through the house slowly, almost deliberately, touching the counters and the door frames with her fingertips the way a person does when they're looking for something to criticize. She complimented the kitchen in that particular tone. She had the one where the words were positive, but the delivery made you feel like you'd been graded and barely passed. "Very modern," she said, looking at the cabinets. "Very minimalist." She smiled. Daniel laughed and said that was basically a compliment from her, and she patted his arm without looking at me. I watched her for the first hour of the party the way you watch weather. Not constantly, not obsessively, but with one part of your attention always tracking. She moved from group to group, whispering things I couldn't hear, and twice I caught her looking directly at me while she was leaning in close to someone else's ear. My stomach tightened both times. I told myself I was being paranoid. I wasn't. About 90 minutes into the evening, when the food was mostly eaten and the room had settled into the warm, slow rhythm of a party winding toward its best hour, Daniel clinked a fork against his glass and asked everyone to gather in the living room. He wanted to say a few words. People drifted in from the kitchen and the patio, filling the couches and the floor space, holding drinks, smiling. Daniel put his arm around me and looked around the room and said that this house was something we had worked toward together for a long time and that having everyone here to share it meant more than he could say. People clapped. Someone in the back let out a small cheer. I felt the warmth of it move through me like something settling into place. And then Patricia spoke. She was standing near the edge of the room, close to the hallway, and her voice was calm and measured the way a person's voice is when they have been rehearsing what they are about to say. She said she was so glad everyone was here tonight. She said she thought it was important for family to be honest with each other. She said she had something she needed to share, and that she was only saying it because she loved her son. The room got quiet the way rooms do when the air changes. Daniel frowned and turned toward her. "Mom," he said slowly, "what are you doing?" She looked at me, not at him, and said she had recently found out something about Megan that Daniel had a right to know. She said she had spoken to a financial advisor who had looked over some of the accounts and that there were concerns. Serious ones. I heard the word concerns land in the room like a stone hitting water. She continued. She said that money had been moved out of the joint savings account over the past year in a pattern that didn't look right. She said she had documents. She reached into the bag on her shoulder and pulled out a small folder and held it up. She said she loved Megan and she hoped she was wrong, but she was afraid her daughter-in-law had been quietly draining their savings and she couldn't stay silent any longer. The room erupted in whispers. Someone near the kitchen doorway said, "Oh my God," softly. I saw Daniel's brother James turn to look at his wife. I saw two of our friends exchange a look across the room that I will never forget, that quick, unspoken calculation where people decide, even for just a second, how much they believe something before they have heard any evidence at all. Daniel slowly removed his arm from my shoulder and looked at me. His face was pale. "Megan," he said quietly. "What is she talking about?" The room was watching me. Patricia was watching me with that particular expression she had, not distressed, not uncertain, but composed, almost satisfied, the face of a person who believes they have already won. And I looked back at her, and I took one slow breath. And then I smiled. She blinked. That was the reaction she wasn't expecting. The people closest to me shifted slightly. "Why are you smiling?" Patricia asked. Her voice had an edge to it now. I looked at Daniel first. I told him I was not going to argue in the middle of our housewarming party. He started to say something, but I kept going. I said that Patricia had brought documents, and that was fine, and that documents could be looked at together. I said that I thought it would be a very good idea, actually, for everyone to see this clearly. Patricia's chin lifted. She said, of course, that was exactly what she wanted. I nodded. Then I looked at the folder in her hand and said, "Why don't you connect your phone to the TV? I saw you taking photos of those documents earlier." The room went completely still. Patricia's expression flickered. Just for a second. So quickly that most people probably didn't catch it. But I did. She recovered quickly. She said there was no need for theatrics, that the documents were right there in her hand, and Daniel could look at them. I said I understood, but if we put them on the screen, everyone could see everything at once, and there would be no confusion about what was being claimed. I said I thought that was only fair, since she had chosen to bring this up in front of everyone. Someone in the room murmured that it seemed reasonable. Daniel looked between his mother and me. He was trying to read the situation, trying to understand why I wasn't defending myself, why I seemed so calm. Patricia looked at the folder, then at me, then at the television on the wall. She set the folder on the side table and said fine, she would use her phone since she had photographed everything. She made a show of being unaffected, businesslike, as if this were a procedure rather than an ambush at her son's housewarming party. She connected her phone to the TV with the cable near the stand, and the images appeared on the screen. The documents were real enough-looking bank statements, spreadsheet printouts, a series of transfers highlighted in yellow. Patricia had clearly put work into this presentation. She stood near the television and walked through it like she was giving a briefing. "This transfer," she said, and this one here, all of them moving money away from the joint account into a personal account that Daniel had no access to. Daniel stared at the screen. He looked sick. James put a hand on his shoulder. A few of the guests were watching me with that careful look people get when they aren't sure yet, but are beginning to lean in a direction. Patricia finished and crossed her arms and looked at me and said, "Would you like to explain that?" I looked at the screen for a moment. Then I said, "Yes, I'd love to." I reached into the small bag I had set on the side table earlier in the evening. Not dramatically, not slowly for effect, just naturally, the way you reach for something you have been waiting to use. I pulled out my own folder. Patricia's arms slowly uncrossed. I said that I wanted to be clear about something first. I said that those transfers Patricia had highlighted were real. That the money had moved, exactly as she said. The room tensed. Daniel looked at me, and I saw something crack behind his eyes. I said, "But I'd like to show everyone where that money actually went." I handed my folder to Daniel first. He took it slowly. Inside were the same bank statements, but printed in full, not cropped, not highlighted in selective yellow. The complete records, showing not just the transfers out of the joint account, but the full trail of each one. Where the money came from, where it went, what it paid for. Daniel began reading. His brow furrowed. He turned to the second page. His expression began to change. I asked him to read the line I had marked at the bottom of the second page. Out loud, if he didn't mind. He cleared his throat. He said, "Transferred to Caldwell Home Purchase Escrow Account Closing Cost Reserves." Silence. I looked at the room. I explained, calmly, that every single transfer Patricia had highlighted was a planned movement of funds to cover our closing costs, our inspection fees, our first-year homeowner's insurance, and the emergency reserve our mortgage lender required before they would finalize the loan. Every dollar had a destination. Every dollar was documented. I had the receipts, the lender's instructions, the escrow confirmation, all of it in that folder. I pointed at the television, still showing Patricia's carefully selected screenshots. She had photographed the transfers, I said. She had just chosen not to photograph what came next. The room was completely quiet. Daniel looked up from the folder. He looked at the television. He looked at his mother. Patricia opened her mouth. She said, and I will never forget the way her voice changed just slightly, that small shift when confidence becomes something more brittle. She said the financial advisor had flagged those transfers specifically. I said that was interesting. I asked which financial advisor and what their credentials were. Patricia said she didn't see why that was relevant. I said I thought it was quite relevant because I had worked in business accounting for 7 years, and the records she was describing as suspicious were standard closing procedure for a mortgage of this size, and any licensed financial advisor would have known that immediately. James spoke for the first time. He said, "Mom, what is going on?" Patricia said she was trying to protect Daniel. Daniel set the folder down on the coffee table. His voice was very quiet and very even. He said, "From what, exactly?" I held up one hand gently. I said there was one more thing I wanted to share, and I asked if I could use the television for a moment. No one objected. Patricia didn't move to stop me. I connected my own phone to the cable. I had 3 things pulled up and ready. The first was an email chain between Patricia and someone named Gerald Fowler, dated 8 weeks earlier. I had discovered it 2 weeks ago, and I had been sitting with it ever since, hoping I would never need to use it. Gerald Fowler, I explained, was a man Patricia had hired to go through our financial records, not a licensed financial advisor, but a retired bookkeeper she had found through a family acquaintance. In the emails, Patricia had sent him selective screenshots of our account and asked him to identify anything that could be made to look like financial misconduct. The word made was right there in the email. Made to look like. The room reacted. Someone said, "Oh wow." Someone else repeated the phrase under their breath. I heard Daniel's friend Marcus exhale slowly behind me. Patricia said that was taken out of context. I moved to the second item. It was a text thread between Patricia and Daniel's aunt, sent 6 weeks ago. In it, Patricia said that she had been worried since the beginning that Megan was the kind of person who married for security and that she thought Daniel was too trusting. She said she was putting together something that would finally open his eyes. Daniel read the messages on the screen. He read them twice. His jaw was tight. Patricia said she had only been expressing concern to family. Daniel turned toward her slowly and asked if putting together something was just expressing concern. She said he was misunderstanding her intentions. I moved to the third item. I said I wanted to be careful here because I didn't want to turn our housewarming into something ugly. I said I had found these things and sat on them for 2 weeks, hoping I would never need to use them. But I also wanted Daniel and everyone in this room to understand that what Patricia had presented tonight was not the result of genuine concern or a real discovery. It was a project. It was something she had been building for months. The third item was a voicemail. I had typed out the transcript so it could be read on screen. The voicemail had been left on Patricia's home phone. I had not hacked it. I had not done anything improper. It had been forwarded to me accidentally by a family member who had thought they were forwarding something else entirely. In the voicemail, a woman whose number matched Gerald Fowler's office said she was calling back regarding the documents Patricia had requested, and that she had the prepared summary ready and had made the language as strong as possible as discussed. As discussed. The prepared summary. Made to look like. As strong as possible. The room had gone absolutely still in that particular way where no one wants to be the first person to speak. Patricia looked at the television for a long moment. Then she looked at Daniel. Her expression had shifted into something I hadn't seen on her before. Not the composure, not the confidence, but something that looked a lot like a person trying to decide whether to push further or retreat. She chose neither. She said this wasn't what it looked like. She said she had genuinely been concerned and that Gerald had simply helped her organize her thoughts. Daniel said her name. Just her name. The way you say a word when you're too tired to say anything else. She tried again. She said she just didn't want him to end up hurt. She said she had always worried that Megan wasn't. And Daniel said, "Stop." The room stayed quiet. Patricia stopped. He looked at her for a moment, and then he turned away and looked at me. His eyes were different now from the way they had looked 5 minutes ago when he had pulled his arm from my shoulder. He looked at me the way someone looks at you when they realize they are standing in the middle of something that has been true for a long time and they are only now seeing the whole shape of it. He said, "How long have you had all of this?" I said, 2 weeks. He said, "Why didn't you tell me?" I said I had wanted to give her a chance to stop on her own. I said I had hoped the party would just be a party. And I said that even now, having to do this in front of everyone, the thing I felt most was tired. Not angry, not triumphant, just tired and relieved that it was over. Daniel looked at his mother for a long time. The room waited. He finally said that he needed her to leave. His voice was not raised. It was flat and measured in the way that is somehow harder to hear than yelling. Patricia looked around the room, at James, at Daniel's father, who had been standing near the back wall this entire time and had not said a single word. She looked at the guests. No one spoke. No one stepped forward. She picked up her bag. She picked up her folder. She walked to the front door and opened it herself and left without saying another word. The door closed. For a moment, the living room was completely silent. Filled with the small lights we had strung up for the party and the remnants of food on the table and the soft background music that had been playing the entire time through all of it, cheerful and oblivious. Then Daniel's friend Marcus said, very carefully, "Should we? Is there still cake?" A few people laughed. The kind of laughter that comes out of tension the way air comes out of something that's been squeezed too hard. It wasn't funny, exactly, but it broke the surface and let everyone breathe again. Daniel reached over and took my hand. He held it properly this time, his fingers laced through mine. He said my name quietly, and I looked at him. He said he was sorry. Not just for tonight, I could hear all of it in those 3 words. For every time he had minimized a comment his mother made. For every time I had tried to tell him something felt wrong and he had gently redirected the conversation. For 6 years of small moments where he had chosen the easier interpretation. I told him we were okay. Because we were. The house was still standing. The lights were still strung across the patio. The walls had heard what they needed to hear on their first real night. We cut the cake. In the weeks after that night, several things happened. Daniel had a long conversation with his father, who admitted he had known Patricia was gathering information but had believed it was out of genuine concern and hadn't realized how far it had gone. James called Daniel and apologized for not speaking up sooner. A few of the guests reached out to me privately to say they were sorry for the looks on their faces when Patricia was talking, for that half second when some of them had wavered. I told each of them that I understood. I would have wavered too. Patricia did not reach out to me. She called Daniel 3 times in the first week, and each of those calls were long. I don't know everything that was said in them. That was between him and his mother, and I believed it needed to stay that way. What I do know is that Daniel came out of each of those conversations looking like a man who had picked up something heavy and put it down and wasn't sure yet whether his hands still worked right. She had not engaged a licensed financial professional. Gerald Fowler, it turned out, had a long history of doing this sort of work, organizing financial records in ways designed to suggest wrongdoing that didn't actually exist. He operated in a gray area that was legal enough to be difficult to address, but dishonest enough to have ruined more than a few lives. I looked him up after the party and found 2 other people who had described similar experiences in online forums. I saved those links. I haven't decided yet what to do with them. The house is different now. Not in a bad way, in the way that places get when something real has happened in them, when the walls have absorbed something and it becomes part of the texture of being there. I walk through the kitchen in the mornings and I think about that night and I feel something that is not quite pride and not quite relief, but something that lives between the two. Daniel asked me once, about a month after the party, why I had smiled when Patricia first made her accusation. He said it had unnerved him a little in the moment. I told him the truth. I smiled because I was terrified. Because smiling was the only thing I could do that she wouldn't know how to respond to. Because standing in your own living room, being accused of something you didn't do, in front of everyone you love, the only protection you have is the quiet knowledge that you are telling the truth. And the truth, it turns out, does not need you to raise your voice. It just needs a little time. If you are watching this and you have ever been in a room where someone you trusted turned something against you, where the people you love looked at you for just a second, like they weren't sure, I want you to know that the most powerful thing you can do in that moment is stay calm. Collect your proof quietly. Do not announce your hand before you are ready to show it. And when the moment comes, let the evidence speak without adding any anger to it. Anger makes people wonder what you are hiding. Clarity makes people see. Patricia and I are not close. I do not expect that to change. But I am no longer afraid of her, and I think she knows it. And I think somewhere underneath everything that is its own kind of resolution. Daniel and I are still in the house. This morning, he made coffee and brought me a cup without me asking, and we sat on the back patio in the early light with the plants we are slowly killing and definitely going to replace, and he reached over and took my hand the same way he did that night, fingers laced through mine. The house still has boxes we haven't unpacked. We have time. That's your story, approximately 5,000 words, pure narrative, applying all the formulas from the analysis. The key upgrades from the original. Patricia's scheme is documented and premeditated, stronger twist. The reveal happens in 3 escalating stages, building tension better. And the ending gives full emotional closure, plus a shareable message for the audience.